Oh, my.
I just turned the recording on, so you may start.
Is that much of you for?
Yeah. I can. Okay, awesome. Cool. I will do that in a minute. Okay, I think I'll start. I think I'll start with the story. Never do. So, hello, everybody who is joining. I can see your beautiful face, or just a picture of your beautiful face, or just look at your beautiful name. It's always nice to be joined by folks to learn about stuff you never learned in Hebrew school, which is the name of this particular group of classes, session. It's a group of sessions of classes that I'm teaching. I think all year, right, Jennifer? All year? You can meet all year. So I have different subjects because we all get to teach things, and I like to teach things that are maybe somewhat surprising. They were surprising to me when I learned about them, so I rather arrogantly assumed they would be surprising to everybody because I was like, I don't know, I only went to Hebrew school as a kid, and I was surprised once I went to rabbinical school. There are a large breadth of things that Judaism has what to say about, and maybe you do too, or maybe you're like, of course, I knew Judaism had lots of things to say about whatever things, and then you'll tell me what's what. That's always fun too. That usually happens at least once a session. So, yeah, I'm going to do something that I don't usually do, which is I'm going to start with a story from a book, and I see my parents around here, so they'll recognize this book because they sent it to me because this. And it's a collection of, my dad would read these to me at night because they're called Night Tales from Long Ago. So things that you should read at night. And they are all kind of Jewish fables and spun from Jewish tales. They're definitely Jewish, and they are definitely never what I would have thought of as being rooted in anything actually Jewish until the stuff I'm going to teach you. But I'm going to start with the story. I'm not going to end with the story. I'm going to start with the story. So in this, we have a story of there is a woman who wants to have a child. She has what they call a child ache, which is the ache of a person who really, really wants to have a child. She'd been married for 10 years. Her name was Ma'aka. Ma'aka and Nachshon had been married for 10 years, but they had no children. Common trope. Nachshon accepted his fate because who was he to question the ways of the good Lord God, blessed be he. However, Ma'aka saw things differently. What was the value of her life, she asked, if it was without the greatest treasure, that of a child? She worried and worried. She could hardly sleep. She changed eating only fruits. Then she ate only meat. She fasted. She prayed. She went from doctor to doctor and specialist to specialist. Still no children. She turned to herbal healers and hermits and mystical heretics. The child is a blessing, she told them, but each child has his own blessing, and my life is empty of these blessings. The healers, hermits, and heretics were all sympathetic. They offered herbs, prayers, and charms, but nothing helped. One day, Ma'aka heard that Rabbi Ashelrod was not only a famous scholar, he was also a great miracle worker. Gangelt was a long, uncomfortable journey from Cohen, where she lived. Ma'aka set off alone to see the rabbi. It was summer, the air was warm and heavy, and the traveling was slow and tiresome and wearing. The childless woman reached Cologne uneventfully. She got directions to the Jewish area, and she located the alleyway along the synagogue building. It was early in the afternoon. She found Rabbi Abraham sitting by himself in the back study room. He received her politely. She poured out her soul to him. Ma'aka wept and she pleaded. She stood and she waved her arms. Rabbi, she said in a loud and trembling voice, bless me so I have a son or daughter. That was a very common thing. Those days you go to a rabbi, ask for the blessing to have a child. Bless me, otherwise my life will not be worth living. Although the sun seems to keep some of my pain away, the nights I cannot sleep because of the great ache I feel, the great child ache. The rabbi listened to the woman. He nodded. He tapped his chin. He stroked his beard. He said to her, I have never been to where you live, this town called Gangelt. Could you describe it so I can picture it? And she said, of course. She told him it was a very small town, only 3 buildings. There's a river and fields and people and their families and important people and less important people. There's no formal synagogue. Everyone just kind of got together and prayed in the cheder in the schoolhouse. And she told her whole life story. Finally, she described her house, her yard, goats, chickens. He listened very patiently. When she stopped talking, the rabbi heard her entire answer. He nodded and he said, let me think. And he closed his eyes, he took a deep breath, and he settled back in his chair. And he finally opened his eyes. He looked at her and he said, my good woman, I have had a vision. In your village lives an unusual man. I think he sits by a well. Do you know him? A well. That's important. Certainly, replied Ma'aka. In town, he's called the Mad Water Drawer, that he lives by himself in this little tumble-down hut. Yes, exactly, said the rabbi. Now, my good woman, this man is really a demon. Ma'aka's eyes widened. Yes, continued old Ashelrad, I am afraid he is a demon in human form. Oh, Lord in heaven, protect us, said the woman, shivering. This is what we always suspected. Well, he is the cause of your problem, said the rabbi. Now, Ma'aka, go home. Ask this man to bless you. It is the demon's fault you are childless, and only he has the power to reverse the evil. But what if he refuses? Asked Ma'aka. The rabbi looked up at the ceiling, stroked his beard. He said, listen, young woman, this is what you do. Ma'aka bent forward to hear, but instead of saying anything, old Asherah was muttering and nodding to himself. Who was he talking to? Finally, he reached into his drawer, took out a piece of clean kosher parchment. He closed his eyes, he said a silent prayer. In his small, neat handwriting, he wrote the Shema on one side. And then he wrote in this sacred ink that had been mixed with incense. And when it dried, he turned the parchment over and he wrote, this is considerable. In the name of Yahweh, he wouldn't write Yud Hey Vav Hey in the story. Elohim, the Lord God of Israel, we shall do and we shall prosper, we shall be fruitful. May Akriel, the angel of barrenness, and Armasiel, the angel of the womb, grant to Ma'aka and her husband Nachshon, the son of Azariah, children of health and light. Ma'aka and Nachshon held fast to the law of the Lord, as it said in the book of Deuteronomy, and then the Lord shall love you and bless you and cause you to increase. He will bless the fruit of your body and the fruit of your land. Now he beseeched the Holy Lord God, blessed be he by the power of his greatness, and the names of the 70 great angels of the God of Israel, especially Sanvi, Sensavi, and Semengalf, and under the prayers of all the righteous people, and by the powers of all the signs and symbols and holy words written and inscribed herein, to restrain and to repel all demons, Dybbuk, devils, and Lilin, both male and female, and protect Ma'aka, her husband, and her future children by his good grace, and to guard them like the apples of his eye, and preserve them in their goings out and their comings in from now and forevermore. Amen. Selah, amen. Yahweh Adonai, amen. Long story short, she takes this little thing, he wraps it up and he ties it in knots, unknots it 7 times. She gives her this amulet. She goes to the water drawer who sits by the well, and wouldn't you know it actually is a demon. And she holds that amulet against him until he lets her go and swears to God that she'll have children, and of course she does. And you look at that story and you go, that's errant nonsense. There's no way that has any history, anything Jewish is in that. It's just I don't know, Bubba old wives' tales. So I'm gonna show you I don't know, was it old wives' tale or a Bubba Miser or what, but it is some very, very deep Jewish roots. Susan, do you have a question before we go, or was that like a accident? So your little hand went up, a little pretend hand. Gonna go with an accident. Okay. So share screen because I like doing that. That's fun for me. Cool. So. Amulets and Judaism. Stuff we probably didn't learn in Hebrew school. I know I didn't, for sure. And since I can't see almost any of y'all, so if you have a question or you want me to like stop, you're gonna have to unmute yourself or raise your hand or wave your arms around a lot. So I'll remember to stop every once in a while, but once this train starts going. So just how old are amulets, the idea of amulets in Judaism? Anyway, maybe it's a very modern thing. Nope. If we look back at the Mishnah, which is our earliest Jewish legal text, it was compiled around 200, so it's actually much older than that. We see this one line. We should see a lot of lines, but this is like one of the most important ones. Everything else is based off. There's a rule about what you can and can't carry around on Shabbat. There's a rule you can't carry things outside of the domain, your public into the private, or private into public domain on Shabbat or within the public domain. So what are the kinds of things you can and can't carry? Well, you can't go out on Shabbat with a spiked sandal, because we have so many. I guess like it's a cleat or something. Or a single sandal if you don't have a wound on your foot. Okay. And one may neither go out with tefillin nor with an amulet when it's not from an expert. So what does this tell us about how our ancient rabbis thought about amulets? Just unmute yourself. You don't have to even show your video. Just start talking like God on high.
They took them very seriously.
They did take them very seriously. If they didn't, they wouldn't be talking about it. clearly amulets can be written by non-experts. If they're saying, well, if it's not written by an expert, it can't become, but if it's written by an expert, which means there are expert written amulets. So clearly they do take them seriously, and amulets are something that are common. This is in line with things like shoes and tefillin. So like, this is not something like oh, amulet, we don't, no, clearly this is something people know about, they are talking about, they are using amulets. Amulets are a clear part of kind of Jewish experience 2,000 years ago. We were already using it. I bolded the word kameha, which is right here, which is the term for amulet in ancient literature. So that's about 2,000 years ago. So amulets are a very, very old idea in Judaism. Okay, but that could mean a million different things. But did they actually work? Fast forward to the Talmud, which is the rabbis commenting on the Mishnah, the rabbis in the Talmud. And they have a very, very, so many like pages and pages. But speaking of that exact part of the Mishnah that we just learned, which is not with an amulet if it's not from an expert. If it's not from an expert, you can't carry it around. The rabbis in the Talmud speak about it. They say, Rav Papa said, don't say you can only go out with an amulet if the person who wrote it is an expert and the amulet has proven effective. Rather, if the person who wrote it is an expert, even if the amulet has not been proven effective, you can still go out with it. Whoa, wait. So there are expert amulet writers, and there is a way to determine whether the amulets are actually effective. So again, we are a very rational religion. We say that all the time. Oh, Judaism is such a rational religion, very rational. And we are. And our ancient rabbis are saying, well, yes, of course there are amulets. There are amulets written by experts and amulets that are written by non-experts. And there are amulets that can be proven to be effective and amulets that have not been proven to be effective. And it's interesting to me that when you look at what the rabbi's own discussion is, they are saying that as long as it was written by an expert amulet writer, even if the amulet has not been proven to be effective, yeah, you can still carry it on Shabbat. Carry it on Shabbat. This is the whole discussion, is can carry it Shabbat. You can't carry anything on Shabbat. But you can carry that on Shabbat, an amulet, even if it hasn't been proven to work. But how do you know that they work? I hope that's your next question. Well, how do you know what makes an effective amulet? How do you know? Well, they teach, interesting, they bring this up into the Tosefta, so it's kind of like doesn't really count so much text. It's not like your most mainstream text, but the Talmud's bringing it in, which to me shows they really want this to make this like a point of saying this is really important to us. This is a real thing, so that even bringing in Tosefta, which is a little kind of a proto Mishnah. So it's weird that they bring it up. They ask, what is an effective amulet? Well, it's any amulet that healed a person once and then healed them again and healed them a third time. That is the criterion for an effective amulet, and it applies to both a written amulet and an amulet of herbal roots. Both if it is proven effective in healing a sick person who is dangerously ill, and if it is proven effective in healing a sick person who is not dangerously ill, it is permitted to go out with these types of amulets on Shabbat. So what do we learn about amulets from the rabbi's rules about amulets, just from the section?
I'm guessing that we're very hopeful because if it's permitted on Shabbat and it hasn't been proven, then go do it. Like maybe it'll work this time.
That's interesting. It's like saying, because if you're going to break Shabbat, because the whole discussion is, can you carry it on Shabbat? And you can't carry it on Shabbat. That breaks one of the main rules of Shabbat. And it's saying like, even if we don't know it's going to work, but if it maybe will work, that's good enough. Like that, which I think you're actually what you're saying even points to the other part, which is what are amulets that the rabbis are talking about used for? They're used for healing. They're used for like you're sick or you're wounded. There's something wrong with your body and you need to be healed from it. And we know that, of course, the Koach Nefesh, saving a life, pushes aside all the Shabbat rules. You can do anything. But like, just to counteract myself for a second, because like, why not? Looking at kind of the end of this section, if it's been proven effective in healing a sick person who is dangerously ill, or if it's been proven effective in healing a sick person who is not dangerously ill. So like I don't know, I have a paper cut, you're not going to die. Like this isn't the amulet, like, oh my God, no, if Bob doesn't carry on this amulet on Shabbat, he could have a heart attack. No, it's like, this isn't like life or death situation, even amulets. So we know amulets in the rabbi's minds can can cure and protect against dangerous disease and like minor disease. And that either way you're allowed to carry it around on Shabbat. And what kinds of amulets? What is an amulet? Because they mentioned 2 different kinds. And neither one is the one I would have ever thought of as being a Jewish amulet. We have written amulets and amulet of herbal roots. So just hold on. I mean, I'm throwing a lot of information at you, and you're going to have to kind of hold on to all of it in your brain as we go forward in the next, 40 minutes. Okay, how holy are amulets? And they must be really holy, right? Because they're like, you're carrying around on Shabbat, right? You'd think they're extremely holy. Ah, rabbis have a lot to say about that too. Ibai Eloho, which is a technical term in Aramaic, meaning a dilemma was raised. Someone said, wait a second. Yeah, they argued amongst themselves too. They asked, do amulets have an element of sanctity, or perhaps do they have no element of sanctity? With regard to what halakha is this dilemma relevant? So why are you even bringing this up? The Gemara asked itself this. If you say it's relevant in regard to rescuing them from a fire on Shabbat, there is a clear resolution to the dilemma. So here the thing is, you can't, if something's burning up on Shabbat, you can't just go running around and it's like, well, no, sorry, but unless it's a person, God forbid, sorry, or like a Torah. Otherwise, it's just going to burn down. You can't put out fires on Shabbat. You can't extinguish. You can't stop things from burning. There's a lot of rules that have to do with fires on Shabbat. So you think, oh, okay, well, you think, oh, if it's an amulet, maybe it's, you should save it. Nope, come here, what was taught. A lot of good, if you have to learn your Talmudic terms, technical terms, there's a lot of them in your Tashma. Here what was taught, the blessings and the amulets. Even though there are letters of holy names in many matters that are in the Torah written on them, one may not rescue them from the fire, and they burn in their place. So we see a couple of things happening here that, again, we're learning by just seeing their discussion. Things that for them were like matters of course, we can learn from this. One, what are on these amulets? Clearly holy names, meaning like God's holy name being the main one. So God's, we're talking about the letters of holy names are on there. And things that are verses from Torah, bits of Torah are on these amulets, which is probably the reason you're allowed to carry it around in the first place on Shabbat, the reason they think they are so powerful, because they have these aspects. However, if they are burning up in a fire on Shabbat, you let them burn. Interesting. I think it's interesting.
Is this speaking to how important human life is, right? So not only is the paper cut or the heart attack judged in size or importance, also we're not to risk our own life to save an amulet.
Interesting. Yeah, like you would risk your own life, to save another life, kind of a thing. If a person's on fire, God forbid, you save them, and you have the Torah. But anything short of that, yeah, it's like if you're going to imperil your life to save something, that the whole point of that thing is to save your life. It's a little like kind of exchanging one set of problems for another. Oh gosh, chat, I'm so bad. What are the only exemptions you said about fires? Only Torah or a person on fire, you can extinguish everything else. Yeah, so like, to make sure you got a good working smoke detector in your house. So yeah, obviously if, you save people from fires, even on Shabbat, and, like Torah's a big discussion because they're like, what do you do? But yeah, you don't save anything else because of the rules about fires, specifically in Shabbat rules. You can't set fires, you can't light fires, and you can't extinguish fires. Those count as work, the 39 kind of super categories of work, av melachot, and those are them. So they have this debate over like, well, if you're going to save a Torah, wouldn't you save this? No, you would not. Sentient beings, you would definitely save people. I feel like you would save your animals. I would have to double check that one, actually. Yes, hi, Charlie. Jennifer's dog, Charlie. Sorry, Charlie. Make sure you keep him with you on Shabbat. It's not going to be an issue. I'd have to check. I can't imagine we would want animals to suffer, but also the Torah and everyone else coming after the Torah were pretty clear that they didn't hold animals in the same regard as they held people. They held them in regard, but not the same regard. Just to be really honest. I'm not going to say something that they didn't actually say. Are we switching? Not switching. Like, okay, sorry. People first, animals second, always. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, the fact that we rank animals, I think, was really cool. But yeah, they're still just animals. Okay, but maybe sometimes they're holy. Okay, if you say that amulets have an element of sanctity, at times one needs to go to the bathroom. It happens, and you'd have to remove the amulets. Like you can't take tefillin if you're praying in the morning and you have your tefillin on in the morning, as you should. But you go to the bathroom, you have to take your tefillin off. Or if you're in the synagogue and you have a talit with the blessing on the neck part, you have to take it off because it has God's name written in it. You can't take anything with God's name into the toilet. That was true back in those days. It's true these days. Why? Because the bathroom stinks. Probably more true then than now, but I mean, I don't know. Guys, y'all live with me. Make that decision. You have to take them off, and otherwise you could forget you remove them, and you end up, or you would forget you remove them, and you would end up carrying them for cubits to the public domain. Since the Mishnah doesn't address these complications, apparently amulets don't have the same sanctity in that regard, and you can enter a bathroom with them, which tells you that they're not that sacred or that holy. But the Gemara doesn't think that's true. They say, well, what are you dealing with here? Well, that's only with the amulets that are made of herbal roots, because those ones definitely aren't at all holy. So interesting. This is very common in the Talmud. They argue with themselves, because two Jews, three opinions. It comes from somewhere, probably comes from here, that they say, well, how holy are amulets? Well, is it just that you like whatever, they're not at all holy, you can take them into the toilet, yada, yada. You go, no. You'd think that, but it's really only those herbal amulets. Those ones are BS. The rabbis say from the Talmud, they say they're not really amulets. I mean, like they're amulets, but not at all holy. Not like those written amulets. Those are really holy. Those, we can see why you wouldn't take those into the bathroom, which kind of makes sense because, again, those would have God's name written on them, and you don't take anything with God's name into the toilet. Then or now. So are amulets holy? Sometimes. Not safe from a fire holy, but don't take them into the toilet holy. Okay, Rabbi, you could actually say very fairly. Okay, maybe this is just something that the rabbis talked about in theory, because there is a lot of that happens in the Talmud. They talk about things that they didn't actually end up doing. They, like the Sota ritual, the ritual for a jealous husband to be like, tell his wife to, drink this magic potion, it's in the Torah. And then we'll know. Or like no one, we have proof pretty much they never did it. They never actually did it. So maybe this is one of those things when the rabbis and the Talmud talk about it in a way that basically even they know no one ever is going to do this thing. Maybe they're just talking about amulets as a kind of a theoretical thing, a mental exercise, but not actually was something anyone actually ended up doing or caring about. Well, untrue. The Mishnah says that little boys can go out on Shabbat with carrying around knots. Just don't ask. Carrying Shabbat, it's a thing. The Gemara asks, well, what are these knots that you're apparently allowed to carry around? This guy said that this guy, none of them had an original thought in their heads, but Rabbi Yehuda said, these are garlands of the madar plant, which apparently is like a thing used to make red dye. I looked it up online. That are tied for their medicinal qualities. Abaye said, my foster mother told me that 3 garlands of madar maintain the illness in its present state, prevent it from worsening. 5 garlands heal the illness, and 7 are effective against sorcery. So clearly, when the rabbis are talking about these different, even this is in this sense, he's talking about herbal amulets. They're saying, yes, herbal amulets are a real thing. Herbal amulets specifically are a real thing. And it's interesting now because we're going into physical illness and spiritual illness, sorcery, that these amulets that we have the ability to make as Jews can help protect you against being sick or being injured, but also against sorcery or witchcraft. Though, just to argue with myself, one could make the argument that in ancient times, they didn't delineate those two. Like we do. But in those days, they thought that, certain demons made you go blind, kind of a thing. Like they kind of, the waters were a little murkier in terms of illness and magic. Whereas nowadays, I think you pretty much like, illness for sure is a real thing. Magic, you do you. Thoughts, questions? You guys seem pretty competent to ask questions. We have questions.
Thinking about the evil eye, right?
Yeah, evil eye comes in at the end.
Okay.
But yes, for sure. For sure. I think we'll get to you and your evil eye. I brought you both Mishnah and Talmud because I thought, why not? They could handle this. So the Mishnah, again, earlier around the year 200, first set of rabbis, they have a discussion and a decision. They say one may go out on Shabbat with a locust egg, a fox tooth, and a nail from the crucified for the purpose of healing. And this is what Rabbi Meir said. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. The rabbis prohibit these remedies even during the week. So we're talking about, again, on Shabbat. But they say you can't even have these things around you during the week. Why? Due to the prohibition of following the ways of the Amorite, non-Jews, pagans. Okay, so healing, we say, okay, there's definitely a big, strong healing kind of verb to this. So we use these amulets, these locust egg, a fox tooth, a nail from someone who was crucified to heal, but you can't do it. The rabbis say that. And when you have this kind of like a minority opinion, the majority opinion, we said the majority opinion was kind of the dominant opinion. Like one guy says you can do it, but the rest of the guys say you can't. So we go, okay, that is prohibited. Interesting though, that they kept the minority opinion. I love that we do this in Judaism, that even though he's a minority opinion, even though we don't follow it, it's still in there. Why? Maybe one day it'll be important. At most a couple hundred years later, the rabbis in the Talmud talking about this, and here's what they say. They say, well, you can go out in this hole, you can go with a locust egg. Why? Because they used it as a talisman to cure an earache, as one does. And with a fox tooth, they use it as a talisman for sleep. And the tooth of a live fox is for if you sleep too much, it wakes you up. And the tooth of a dead fox for if you can't fall asleep. Sure. And a nail from the crucified as a talisman for curing infection, as one does. We learned from this that those going out with those objects is permitted on Shabbat for the purpose of healing. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. It's interesting to me that they bring that part up again. So they don't just like throw away his statement, this like minority opinion. It is a minority opinion, but they are trying to say like, okay, yes, obviously it is something that we don't do because of the whole Amorite thing. We don't want to follow the ways of non-Jews, except for all those times that we do. And why? It's for healing. They're really underlining it's for healing. It's not for being like, we're not doing it so we can be like other people. We're doing it for healing. And if it's for healing, doesn't it supersede everything else? I like when the Talmud doesn't agree with itself. It's more interesting. Very Jewish. Dogs. This is for you, Charlie. Jennifer's schnauzer. I hope he's listening. One bitten by a mad dog will die. What's the remedy? Abaye says, let them bring the skin of a male hyena and write on it, I, so-and-so, son of so-and-so, am writing this spell about you upon the skin of a male hyena. Kanti, kanti, kalirus, and some would say, it should say, kandi, kandi, kaloros, and then they should write the names of God, Yah, Yah, Lord of hosts, Amen, Amen, Selah. This is a written amulet. This is a very clear example from the Talmud, and not even in Shabbat and Yoma, totally different section, of the rabbis. This is the incantation. This is the line. They're telling you what kind of parchment to write it on: male, hyena, and a fill in the blank. So if you get bitten by a mad dog, happens, this is the formula you write on there, and this will save your life. And so you see it says, I, you're writing in the first person, I, state your name, son of, state the name. I'm writing this spell on the skin of a male hyena, so related to the dog. I don't know what kanti kanti kalirus means. I honestly don't. I looked it up and then I had a lot of things to look up. And then you invoke the names of God. Specifically here, Yah, Yah, Adonai Tzivot, which we translate as Lord of Hosts, Amen, Amen, Selah. And you'll start to see that language reverberate through thousands of years, through when people writing amulets use that language, that more or less formula, what they're saying. And when the rabbis, I only brought this one example because again, this could have easily spiraled. Interesting spiral, but spiraled. When they give you these incantations to say, so even if you're not like writing it, if you are walking by a river or a lake at night and there was a fear of water demons because they like to pull people into rivers and lakes at night, especially on certain days of the week, especially if you're a Torah scholar, so you know we're all in trouble. And they give you like this line to say like, I name, and get away from me, thus and such, name demon, God, and then some hocusy pocusy things. This is a very common script for written amulets and kind of spoken incantations that the rabbis, our blessed and wonderful and brilliant ancient rabbis, give us. We're a very rational people.
Sarah,
Please.
where would they have come into contact with hyenas? Are they common where they were in Judea or
I
Israel?
mean, there were definitely like wild dogs.
Mhm.
I don't know if those are hyenas the way when I think of like the Lion King, I think of hyenas, like those kinds of hyenas. I don't know if that would have been it. Though, I mean, we're talking about people who lived in, the rabbis in the Talmud Bavli, so Iraq. I'm sure there is some version of kind of like the African hyena over there. I can't imagine there's not.
Okay. It just seems unusual that it's that specific to be the skin of a male hyena.
Yeah, I mean, the male thing I kind of get, because usually when the rabbis are writing, they're assuming that unless otherwise stated that it's a man that things are happening to. So like when they're, if it's things for women in childbirth, they'll be specified, you need thus and such from a female, whatever.
Mhm.
So I get the male part. The hyena part, it's interesting they would say like that and not just like a dog.
Yeah.
That I find really interesting. Maybe it's because it's like a wild version and otherwise dogs, I mean, I'm sure they kept dogs. I know they kept dogs like domestically.
Could it have just been like the translation? Or is like, I don't read Hebrew, so maybe that actually is the direct word for it. Or is it just like wild dog?
It's
Allie, sorry. My dog is grunting.
he knows we're talking about it. So there's that. I'd have to look it up. Like there might be more than just my own like cursory. I didn't do this particular translation, but I do trust this translation more than I would other ones. Let me look. I'd be curious to know as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Scooting forward, so again, notice we were talking about the Talmud, so we're talking about something that was put together around the year 500, existed earlier, but compiled around the year 500. Scooting forward to the 12th century, the Rambam. Yeah, he's a rationalist, right? He's like he doesn't like any of this nonsense. So he writes here in Moreh Nevuchim, the guide for the perplexed, but my professor made fun of it in school, called a guide to becoming more perplexed, because he's brilliant and very hard to read sometimes. So in his guide for the perplexed, he writes about this. He says, you must beware of sharing the error of those who write amulets, kameot, and uses that specific term. So we know that's the same one they talk about in the Talmud. Whenever you hear from them or read in their works, especially in reference to the names which they form by combination, it's utterly senseless. They call these combinations shemot, names, and believe that their pronunciation demands sanctification and purification, and that by using them, they are enabled to work miracles. Rational persons ought not listen to such men, nor in any way believe their assertions. So that seems rather straightforward of Maimonides, and also not hugely surprising. He was really a rationalist in a lot of ways, in every way pretty much. And so he's sitting there saying, like, people who really, they write amulets, and when they, it's senseless. It makes no sense. They take these letters and they form names and other names and yada, yada, yada. And they think that, saying these names does things. It's miracles. He says, rational people shouldn't listen to them or believe them in anything. And that's the Rambam, who we listen to the Rambam. We love the Rambam. And he seems to come down rather hard on amulets. I would never just show you one thing, but I would never do. Or does he? He references the same thing that we all studied just a moment ago in the Talmud and then previously in the Mishnah, that you can go out as long as it's an expert charm. We saw that. We've seen it. You all are very familiar with that now. You're very well read. And he says, okay, so what's an expert charm? Well, if it's healed 3 people or was made by someone who has healed 3 people with other charms. But if you went out with a charm it's not expert, then you're still exempt from punishment on Shabbat since you took it out in your clothing. So it's not like you're really carrying anything anyway. Rambam, what are you doing? Now, this is also a very different book. Notice, this is what he wrote in the Mishnah Torah. Where am I? Okay, Mishnah Torah Hilchot Shabbat. So he's just giving like kind of psak halacha. He's just giving halachic rulings, Jewish legal rulings. Previously, now everything's, there we go. Previously, we were more in Nuvuchim, which is kind of his philosophical, theological work. So he's saying like, he's like, philosophically, this is ridiculous. Don't ever look at these things. Unbelievable that anyone do such things. But then same guy, different book, different audience. Mishnah Torah, his kind of like how-to Judaism. He says, okay, fine, yes. If you want to have what's an expert charm, yes, as long as it's worked a couple times, it's fine. And even if it didn't work, it's okay because you would wear it in your clothing. It's not like you're really carrying it anyway. Wow, Rambam, way to be lenient, which is not anything he's ever been known for. And I think it's interesting because if he really thought it was wrong, if he thought it was bad and wrong and he shouldn't do it, he would have said, no, you are liable for your punishment for carrying on Shabbat. This thing is ridiculous. You're ridiculous. This is unbelievable. So to me, it says that he thinks it's dumb. Don't worry. I'm 100% sure he thinks it's very dumb. He looked down on the whole practice entirely. But I don't think he could bring himself to condemn people for it. Because he would have if he really was vehemently opposed. Or because it's about, in the end of the day, it's about healing. And he was a doctor, so he knew. And he talks about, again, I couldn't put everything in here, that as long as people think that they're being healed by something, let it go. Which is kind of how I feel about all the people who are like big on astrology nowadays. Like, do I think it's silly? But people are really into it and does it hurt anything? No, and it's making them feel better? Sure. Why not? Placebo effect. No, 100% placebo effect. Yeah. They're like, yeah. And that's another thing though. It's like, if you think it's going to help you, they do actually, I wish I'd had it. I always go like, this whole subject needs a 3-part class on its own. I say that every single time I teach, that's why Jennifer's laughing at me. But I really could do a whole 3-part series on amulets because I'm leaving down to the evil eye yet. But they do talk about that. And it's, I think, the Ramban, because he actually very famously had a lion amulet because the lion brings in a lot of, like, that's astrological, straight up astrological. Oh, dog, hooray, more dogs. Sorry, I can see y'all on the side. I mean, the ones with big, the ones with dogs are showing me dogs. Ramban Nachmanides very famously had a lion amulet that he carried around, and lion was very specific. I mean, that's like, was it Aries? Aries is the lion. As a whole, and so the astrology, and he was very pro, and the Rambam was very anti, and people would pit them against each other. But yeah, I think he's the one who said, like, if it helps people feel better and then they get healed, it counts. So placebo effect indeed. Okay, but now we're going to scoot forward way into modern times. Modern times-ish for Jews a couple hundred years ago. For us, this is modern. But the Shulchan Aruch really is modern. This is Orach Chaim specifically. So when you terms out, like, oh, Jews, we're not Bible Jews. We don't practice Judaism like it is in the Bible. No. And even like rabbinic Jews, like in terms of the Talmud, we're not really Talmud Jews either because Judaism has evolved a lot since then. But by the time you get to the Shulchan Aruch, which is written around 16th century, so it's only like 500 years ago. Then that is really how we practice our Judaism now, is what you see in the Shulchan Aruch, which is a Sephardi text with the an Ashkenazi gloss, or the Mapah, tablecloth. And they pretty much just sum it up right there. It's like one guy. And it says, amulets, if they have verses in them, they're not safe from a fire. And some say that they are saved. Never was there a more Jewish, I know, right? Anna's just like, what the? I mean, it was a very Jewish answer, though. Like, so do we save amulets that have verses of the Torah? If we save the Torah, do we save amulets that have verses of the Torah? No, except some people say yes. So that is our modern Jewish answer to the question of how sacred are amulets? As sacred as you want them to be, I guess. Where am I in time? Oh, this is good. I want to start showing you some examples. Apologies for the really bad pictures. Those are definitely the ones I took on my phone from my computer, like an old person. I can move this out of the way. Move you all out of the way. There we go. No, that's a terrible idea. There you go. So amulet bowls are kind of a precursor to amulets as we really know them. There are a few of these left in the world. You see they're both from Iraq because most of them are, I think there's 6 that they've managed to find intact. They're Mesopotamian, but there are other, I have a story about amulet bowls. You can see though these are, very different and from different places, they have a lot of similarities from the list. Indeed, all of the amulet bowls that we have found all have a lot of these things in common. So there's Aramaic or some derivative of Aramaic. So it's like Hebrew letters, but not Hebrew. It's a little bit more modern than that. There is a demon, often Lilith, but not always Lilith. You see the demon in the middle. The demon is frontal, so they are facing this direction. They are chained. It's kind of hard. I mean, it's an artistic interpretation of chain. These people were not, they're doing the best art they could. They use those lines, that's chains. They're chained, their arms and their legs are chained. You can see them, they're very clearly arms, legs chained. They have a full face. You see the full face facing you. There's no profile if you're seeing this version, and they usually have big eyes, big googly eyes. What kinds of stuff do you put on these amulet bowls? Well, if they're ones about Lilith specifically, it's usually to keep her away from babies, especially newborn babies, especially newborn baby boys that have not been circumcised yet, or just to keep her away from mothers who have just given birth in general or are going to give birth. You would take this bowl, you would have your little incantation written around it. Fun fact, some of them are written with like gobbledygook. I know it looks like gobbledygook, but they really do actually say things on the inside. But they found that some of these amulet bowls that are extremely old, look at them, looking at the 6th, 7th century, it's like they would have like nonsense written on the inside, like on purpose. I don't think we know why they would do that, but they did. You take this bowl and you would flip it upside down and you'd bury it under the floor of your house. Because the idea is they would go under there and it would trap whatever demon it is that you're worried about, Lilith or one of the other myriad of demons. And that's what your amulet bowl would do for you. What you see there in the kind of the scripty letters is the translation found inside of one of these amulet bowls. It's definitely not the one on the left. It might be the one on the right, but I haven't studied. I know that it is an amulet bowl, but it refers to Liliths because the Lilith could also just be not the specific Lilith, could be the kind of category of demon Lilith. So you Liliths, male Lily and female Lily, and these weird names like I adjure you, by the rock of Isaac, the strong one, Abraham, Shaddai, of Jacob, turn away from this person and her husband, get away. And then amen, Selah, hallelujah. So again, you're seeing that language reflected. Again, it's not the same, it's not a formula exactly, but it's the same kind of language reflected a couple hundred years later in these amulet bowls. Fun fact, when I was on an archaeological dig in college, I was in Ashkelon, in a non-Jewish, Ashkelon is Jewish now, yes, but it wasn't always. In fact, most of history, it's not been Jewish. And we were digging up like ancient Philistine houses, and we would find, it's macabre, I'm sorry to all the dogs and dog lovers listening, but we would find jars under the floors with puppies in them. And they're still trying to figure out like why people would bury jars with puppies. But I think it was very purposeful and kind of like a protection kind of a thing. Maybe fertility, but probably protection. So burying things underneath the floor, it was not unheard of in ancient society, Jewish or otherwise. So we're just kind of doing what everyone else is doing, but in a kind of a Jewish way. These are amulet bowls, the kind of proto amulets. Now these should look somewhat more familiar, a lot more familiar. These are metal amulets. You see the one on the left is from our very own museum. We have several amulets here on display in our own museum case here at Beth Yeshurun. So if you're here, come check it out. This one is from Italy on the left, early 17th century. You'll notice, and I apologize if you can't see it. I realize it is dark and your screen, I don't know how big your screen is. You'll see what are the things that make this an amulet, what makes Jewish amulets Jewish. Well, we've got God's name. In this particular case, we have Shaddai. You see the menorah, not like the Hanukkah menorah, but the 7-branch menorah, like the one from the temple. You see the eternal light. You see Cohen. I mean, I think this might be on the back of it because this is the front. A picture of the back over here. But yeah, it's on the other side. Other things you'll start to see on these metal amulets, the Cohen hands doing the actual Birkat Kohanim. You see the Cohen hat, which is just a very silly looking hat, but they really loved it. That's the kind of imagery you see over and over on these metal amulets that you start to see more around it. I mean, this is 17th century. They see older ones as well. On the right side, you see another one. Same thing, you have God's name, not the same name though. Instead of Shaddai, you have got the Yud Hey Vav Hey, I'm not going to say it. This one has a demon. So hearkening back to those much, much older amulet bowls, this one might or might not be Lilith. It is bound. You can see by the little hash marks on the legs. It's been bound in chains. And you've got all these angel names. People love invoking the angels on their amulets, not just the metal ones, but definitely the metal ones as well. This one is from Iran. So you have Iran on one side, you have Italy on the other side. Everyone's making amulets. The Sephardim are making amulets. The Mizrahim are making amulets. The Ashkenazim are definitely making amulets. We all love amulets. It's very Jewish. Again, you can see the one on the left in our very own museum. The one on the right, you cannot. It's in Israel. Sometimes they're made of mixed material and they get really weird, like this one. This one's from Alsace, so this is an Ashkenazi one. I mean, I live in Ashkenazi, France. This one is made of lots of materials, made of silk. It is made of engraved silver. It's made of, there's horse tooth in there. There is wood. There is coral. There is a glass bead. There's some eternal light. It's not actual light, obviously. This is centimeters large. It is a circumcision amulet. Very common. And you would have that usually under the baby's pillow. There's a lot of concern and danger about demons, about sickness, about Lilith, between when a baby boy was born and until the circumcision. And you gotta figure also just having new babies was pretty nerve-wracking. And you can't see it, and I apologize, it's just a terrible photo. But the little heart which is silver, is engraved with a hay, most likely for the first name of the.
It's like a precursor to a charm bracelet.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, because charms are not singularly Jewish. I mean, I think it's a human nature thing. Is you want to have something in your hand, and it's just something very comforting about that, and tactile. It is definitely, it's a charm bracelet, but for circumcision. And it's like a little pillow, little heart, it's cute. Again, looking at that timing, relatively modern, 18th to 19th centuries. Jews in Ashkenazi, Eastern Europe has tended to fall off from making amulets around the time of, shockingly, the Second World War. Whereas Jews in kind of Sephardi countries, Mizrahi, still have a lot of them. And with the exception of what I just said, being kind of Hasidic, Chabad, the whole dollar from the Rebbe thing, which is a modern idea. Parchment amulets, one that I always thought this would be an amulet, actually. We've got there's lots of stuff. See the one on the left, 1900 to 1910 or so. There's this idea of magic triangles with parchment amulets. The idea being that if you folded something into, I think the 3 is its own thing. I have nothing to back that up. It's my own feeling on just the number 3. But the idea if you could fold something down really, really, really small, it could minimize the bad stuff. That was the thought of magic triangles in parchment in an amulet making. Parchment, you can't, unless you both speak Yiddish and can read incredibly tiny writing. The one on the left, they kind of invoke the names of all the mothers in the line. That's very common, that amulets, even the rabbis even talk about this. They say, how do you describe a person in an amulet? They say, well, you have to say it's like the person and whose mother is this person, whose mother is this person. You invoke the mothers. You only invoke the mothers. When you say a mishaber for the cholim, a prayer for people who are in need of healing, who are sick, traditionally speaking, you say it's like the person, son or daughter of their mom. Even if, not even if you're Orthodox, but that's how you do it in Orthodox circles. You don't use do the dad's name, do the mom's name for healing. You do the dad's name for everything else. Don't worry, they get plenty of airtime. And here, on the ones on the left, just kind of prayers for health and success from not that long ago. Ukraine. On the one on the right is, and also interesting, the one on the left, those are handwritten less than 100 years ago, 100 years ago or so. On the right, you see, we did start to see not just like handwritten amulets, but also like printed amulets. Like, what, you could just print them out? Apparently, you can also just print things. But this is more of a representation of, you would just draw it. Medieval amulet, this is to protect mother and child against attacks from Lilith during childbirth, Amsterdam, about 300 years ago. And if you see, well, here we go. So you can see we have Adam v'Chava. That's very, this is very common. This is on parchment amulets and even metal amulets all the time. Adam v'Chava, Adam and Eve. It is, so you know, thinking of the first man, first woman, children. Lilith, kind of Adam's fault over there. We have Lilith right here, her name. Boom, boom, boom. And we have these three, here's the names, and we actually heard it in the story earlier, and I can never pronounce it. It's like the weirdest things. Sanvi, San, Savi, and Semengolf. Here they are. Semengolf. Boom, boom, boom. Three very kind of common angels to invoke. There's so many angels that are invoked in amulets, so many angels that are invoked. These are pretty common ones, especially when it comes to children and childbirth and fertility. You see these three guys over and over and over, over and over and over. That's very common in parchment amulets. Now, things that people think of as amulets, and I'm just going to present information and pretend like I'm not biased. So the Hamza is almost certainly Muslim in origin. The Kabbalists, being ones who lived around Muslims, probably picked up on it. Nothing wrong with that. I was in the airport once with my Hamza necklace, which of course is the one day I forgot to wear it. And there was a guy who was like, you know what you're wearing? And I was like, yes. He's like, it's the hand of Fatima. I'm like, cool. Because I wasn't going to get into an argument. But he was right, it is the hand of Fatima. Sometimes also known as the hand of Miriam, for that one too. Not sure why that one. And there is a certain repeated imagery. They often are, you see blue or blue and red, the eye, the evil eye, to keep away the evil eye. You'll see fish, fertility symbol. You'll see this, sometimes the Cohen breastplate. You see that on one of these over here, actually, nicely. Boom, boom. You see pomegranate. Actually, no, pomegranates in here. There's some fish. What else is in pomegranate? Sometimes you see pomegranates. I don't know if these specific ones are pomegranates. The Cohen hands, and blue and red, and God's name, often Shaddai, but not only. You'll sometimes see Chai, that's they're, you know, Mazal and Briut and Hatzlacha. So they're kind of like these aren't angels, these are kind of just values or things you might want, like luck and health and, you know, things the Jews have been praying for in amulets, as you've seen yourself from just now, for thousands of years. Definitely, almost certainly Muslim in origin. Nothing wrong with that. Because, you know, Muslims in their origin is Jewish, so, you know, it's full circle. I love them. I have a whole wall full of them. I think they're pretty. I say I wear one every day, but I'm clearly a liar. But I usually wear it every day, except for when I forget. Questions? There's only like 2 more slides. I'm finally doing good on time. It's never happens. The red string bracelet. I'm gonna tick people off with this one. Jews have been talking about red string bracelets for a long time. It's just that no one can figure out where it comes from. In the Tosefta, they're like, yeah, does this seem like thing we're doing? Remember, Tosefta is like proto-Mishnah. So a very long time ago, they're like, is this a thing that's happening? And they all could decide like, we have no idea where this comes from. This does not seem Jewish at all. The Hasidim, so like the mystical, Eastern European mystical types. So like Kabbalah, but instead of being from the Muslim area, being from the Christian area, they were talking about it. They couldn't figure out where it comes from. At the end of the day, it's a very common practice. Lots of world cultures have like a red string thing, and people are like, oh, it's a you tie a red string at Rachel's tomb, and then you'll get pregnant. That's it. I've heard that. I've heard that from people. I've heard that other people have said that. Other people tell them now is a real thing. I've heard them be like, is it Jewish? Sure, because Jews do it, so it's a Jewish thing. Why not? It hurts nothing. Where does it come from Jewishly? nowhere specific that I can find or that anyone who's much wiser than me can find, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it or enjoy it. I mean, don't wear a red string bracelet. I mean, when you go to the hotel and those ladies are like, how can you get China by giving them money in exchange for a bracelet? Like, give them some money, like whatever, be nice. But I know, wear it, don't wear it, it's fine. I don't want to yuck anyone's yum. Now, this is not a read, this is, optional, I would say. Not optional to be your mezuzah, but is it a charm? That's a nice little conversation. Oh, wait, there's a chat. If it hasn't been proved, you're still good. Yeah, I mean, sure, it doesn't hurt. Again, I'm not going to yuck anyone's yum. So where's this mezuzah thing come from? Well, it literally comes from the Torah, so you should do it. We say these words every day. Technically, we say them every day. You should inscribe these into the V'ahavta. You should inscribe these words. Which word? Them is the words from Torah on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. You say the word mezuzah, so that's the mezuzah. So we should put that on our doorpost of our house and our gates, and that's the mezuzah. Now, technically, what you're looking at here, as someone who sold Judaica, this is not a mezuzah. This is a mezuzah case. Mezuzah is the parchment on the inside. When I sold these to people and I told them how much the parchment cost, they go, "Oh, I'll just take the case," and I go, "That's not how that works." It counts more. You would do better to take the parchment and put it in a Ziploc baggie and stick it to your doorpost. That would count for fulfilling the mitzvah and the commandment of doing mezuzah. Putting that thing up, putting nothing in it, is just, you just put holes in your wall for some reason. Anyway, why am I sharing this for a whole thing about charms? Because if you ask people, why do you put a mezuzah? Not uncommon, you'll have the answer of, well, doesn't it protect your house? Doesn't it mean that God should protect your house? Doesn't it keep away evil? Well, the reason we put a mezuzah on our house is because God said so. Right here in the Torah, God said do it. So we do it. That being said, a friend of mine back in college, her dad had a heart attack. We were college age, so her dad was young to be having a heart attack, ridiculous. And I remember our shlicha said to her, you're Jewish too, we're all Jewish here, everyone has been Jewish for too long. And the shlicha said to her, like, oh, have you checked the mezuzot? And I was like, why would she check the mezuzot in the house? Like, what? And she's like, you gotta check the mezuzot because like he probably had a heart attack because one of them was like not kosher anymore. And I said, is that a thing? And she was Moroccan and she swore up and down that was true. And wouldn't you know, they checked the mezuzah and one of them was empty. No one ever stopped to look at it. They hadn't had a parchment in it. I'm not saying that's why he had a heart attack because I don't think that's true. However, that is a very common kind of thing. If someone say, oh, and you are supposed to check your mezuzot every couple of years, you should check to make sure this is kosher. Not for bad things happening to your family, but because if they don't count anymore, then you're not following this mitzvah anymore. But there are those, there's kind of like, because there's a mythos has built up around it, which is like, oh, if your mezuzot aren't kosher anymore, or if you don't have mezuzot or blah, then bad things can happen to your house. So if bad things do happen, they say, check your mezuzahs. And there's that. And that's why you get a lot of that. And I think if I'm just like positing, I'm just like thinking on one foot kind of a thing now that we're done officially, that I think part of it's tied into like the whole like red, the blood over the doorposts, from like Pesach. And I think people think like, oh, and that's what told the angel of death to like pass through the house of the Jews. And I think people have the idea like we have to like make sure that keeps our house safe if we kind of demarcate it as a Jewish house. Like, I don't know, it's just me having theories based in literally nothing at all, but I don't know, it sounds real to me. How do they become unkosher? Good question. Because the same way we still also have, if they've aged, yes, if they aged, they get damaged, especially the ones, if you live in, I don't know, a humid place. Or if you have cheap parchment, because sometimes they lime them, which makes, as someone who worked in Judaica, they can actually make it makes them shiny and very bright and easy to read for Torahs, but it flakes off, especially if you live in a place with humidity, it really flakes off. So you really have to kind of check, let's say twice in 7 years, your tefillin, your mezuzot, and of course your Torahs. If you check those, because if they are kosher, then they can't be used. And if you have any, especially outside mezuzot, they can be exposed to the elements. If they're not in a protective case, then that's a whole thing you have to think about. Is you only need one mezuzah on your house if you're outside. It'd be nice to have more. Not for health reasons, just because I think it's good to have more. You should have more, but minimum you need that one outside, which also means that is one that's probably exposed the most to heat, humidity, and rain and snow if you live anywhere that's not here, except for this past winter. So amulets, very Jewish, complicated. For the most part, our rabbis thought they were completely legitimate and worked, certainly in terms of healing, maybe less so in terms of sorcery, but probably also in terms of sorcery as well. We've been doing them all over, Ashkenazi Jews, Mizrahi Jews, Sephardi Jews. We used to do them, we still do them, they're still evolving. I didn't even go to the whole modern thing, like dollars from the Rebbe, and people do that. That's all modern stuff, and people, that's all. So amulets, I'd say, haven't been left behind in the past. I think they're just moving forward into the future as people kind of evolve and grow and get interested in new things and have new kinds of technology. I think we're still into amulets because I think there's something that amulets just speaks to us as people. The idea of being able to hold on to something that can protect you and make you safe and give you control over the world that you have no control in, to the idea that you're being looked after and watched after, and it's tangible. Because Judaism is really a religion of your head, so to have something tangible, I think is really reassuring. And that's just as people, not even just as Jews. That's just my thought. I can stay here for another couple minutes before they close the building. Jennifer's going to warn me, and then so I don't get alarmed in again. So feel free to stick around or not. Thank you so much for joining me. And you can unmute yourselves and whatnot. So thank you so much. I'll see you next time talking about death. By the way, next month, Jennifer, next month, the month after, November, things you didn't learn about in Hebrew school, death. Not what happens after you die, like the literal like death rituals, rites, and tattoos, and cremation, and Jewish cemeteries. So yeah, that's what I'm doing.
So this is ongoing.
Yes, I will do this, I think, this month, once a month or so.
Awesome.
So feel free to join me.
Right, thanks.
Thanks for coming. My parents. Thank you, Rabbi. Since when? Unbelievable. Who's this Ashley?
I don't know.
I think they walked away, including my own parents. I'm not taking that